Hey everyone, this is Harley. We're going to go over setting up your Axial XR10 MOA crawler for use with dual ESCs and a Futaba 4PK radio. We're going to go over the hardware I'm using as well as the programming of the radio. First off, we're going to start out with the speed controls. I'm using two Tekin FXRs mounted on the Axial dual ESC plate that comes with the kit. Inside the receiver box, I'm running a Futaba 604 FS receiver as well as a Castle 10 amp programmable BEC. For steering on this crawler, I'll be running a Futaba BLS 152 servo. For motors, I'm running Holmes Hobby's hand wounds. Axial recommends that you run a 45 turn or higher motor. To power this crawler, I'll be using Maxamp's 1800 3S LiPos or the new Maxamp's 1300 3S LiPos. I'm going to quickly demonstrate the functions we're looking at. I've put tape on the tires to give you a more visual representation of how the tires are spinning. I'm going to first demonstrate four-wheel drive, which is just in equal mixing between the front and rear ESCs. The tires may still turn at a slightly different rate based on differences between the front and rear axles, such as gear mesh, total weight in the front wheels versus the rear wheels, and things like that. Four-wheel drive will be what you're driving around in most of the time. The next function would be front dig. This is when you take any power away from the rear axle and only power the front axle. The next function would be rear dig, which is just the opposite. You take power away from the front and you only power the rear. The next function, which really separates the 4PK from the rest of the radios, is the ability to mix the front and rear axles at different rates. You can run in four-wheel drive and then back down the power while on the fly so that the rear will spin at different rates compared to the front. You can also speed the rear axle up so that it spins faster than the front.
Now that we've gone over what the functions are, we're going to go over how to wire your truck. This diagram shows the components within your truck. You have your front and rear motors, dual ESCs, a steering servo, a battery, a BEC, and your radio's receiver. The first step will be hooking up the motors. For the front motor, you will take the negative and positive outputs from the front ESC and hook them into the negative and positive inputs of the front motor. For the rear motor, however, you will take the negative output from the rear ESC and connect it to the positive input on the rear motor, and vice versa. The polarity of the rear motor wires are switched due to the fact that the rear motor is rotated 180 degrees in relation to the front motor. Next, we will be covering the connections to your receiver. This setup will work with a Futaba 3-channel or 4-channel receiver. First, you'll plug your steering servo into channel 1. Next, your front ESC will be plugged into channel 2, your rear ESC into channel 3, and your BEC can either go into channel 4 or the designated battery input. Note that with this setup, you need to remove the red power wire from each of the ESC's inputs. And finally, the last step will be hooking up your power. This is very simple. Simply take the positive inputs from the ESCs and BEC and hook them up to the positive output from the battery. The same goes for the negative inputs on both of the ESCs and BEC. Once that is finished, your truck is now completely wired and you're ready to program the radio.
Now we're going to get into programming the 4PK. I'm going to start with a new model by going to Model Select, selecting a new model. I'm going to use Model 7 for mine. Pressing plus and minus to select the new model. From there, I will back out. I'll go to Menu T, which stands for Menu Type. Select it. I'm going to change this to Level 3. Right now it's on Level 2. I want to change it to Level 3. So I'll go down to Execute and plus the press and minus at the same time. It'll say it's complete. Now I'm on Level 3. From here, we're going to start off by programming our program mixes first. We're going to start with Program Mix 1. From here, select it. Right now, we're going to set our master to throttle and our slave to channel 3. We're going to set our forward and brake values both to -100. From here, we're going to go down to mode and change our mode from inhibit to active. The on or off in the parentheses to the right is not important. Yours can say off and it will not matter. Go up and over to mix mode and turn that to on or to mix. And then from there, we're going to go to Program Mix 2. On Program Mix 2, we're going to leave our master set to throttle and we're going to set our slave to throttle as well. Same thing here, we're going to change our forward and brake values both to -100. From here, we're going to go down to mode again and change mode to active once again. Again, the on or off to the right is not important. We're going to go over to mix mode and change it from off to mix once again. We're going to back out by hitting end. From here, we're going to go to the dial menu. On the dial menu, this is where you set what button you'll be using to adjust the mix biasing on your radio. For mine, it depends on where the buttons are around your wheel that you feel comfortable with. For me, it is DT1. So I will go down to DT1 and I'm going to change that value to PM1-B. We're going to move to the right, and that value that is currently a 2, I adjust to 10. The 10 represents the percentage in increment that you will be adjusting the rear motor. I prefer to use a 10% biasing adjustment every time I click the button. I believe that it's drastic enough to make an effect while on course that you don't have to hit the button too many times, but not so much that it becomes unpredictable. The buttons are labeled all the way around your radio. You can change whatever button you like to read that. It would be the same if you wanted to change DT2 or DT3. Also, the dials will function the same way. Dial 1 and dial 2 are down by your thumb near the trigger. Dial 3 is on top of the radio. Dial 3 is not as handy to use while on course because it requires you to take your hand off of either the wheel to adjust it. I do not recommend using dial 3. I also set the buttons that I'm not using to off for the time being. I do not prefer to have trim settings programmed onto the DTs or DL buttons on the radio while I'm driving. So right now I have the DT1 button programmed to control the mixing of my ESCs. From here we're going to go to the switch menu. We're going to select the switch menu. On here, this is going to control what buttons control your mixing on or off. This is what will control your dig functions. So for PS1, which is the button near the steering wheel, the large silver button, I'm going to program PS1 to control program mix 1. PS2, which is the button on the grip below the two rollers, I'm going to change that to control program mix 2. We're also going to change these buttons on the right to alternating. From here we're going to back out. We're going to go to the system menu and we're going to confirm that the display style is in servo view. Servo view will display bar graphs across the main screen. For video demonstration, it is easier to see what we're programming. So here we are. We're on our main screen. This is the screen that you'll have when you're driving around. When you pull the trigger right now, you'll see that one bar graph moves, the second one down, representing channel 2. If I were to press the button underneath the steering wheel, which is PS1, I would have 2 bar graphs moving. Right now they're moving in opposite directions. To fix that, we're going to go into the reverse menu, select reverse, and we're going to reverse channel 3. Now you'll see the graphs move in the same direction. These 2 graphs will represent your front and rear motors. The top one will represent your front motor and the bottom one will represent your rear motor. Pulling the trigger, you'll see that both bar graphs move to the far extent. This represents full throttle. If you were to press PS1, the button underneath the steering wheel, you'll see that only 1 bar graph moves. This represents your front dig. You can press it again and it will come back on and you'll have 4-wheel drive. If I press the button on the grip of the radio, you'll see that only the bottom bar graph moves. This represents a rear dig. Again, both moving after pressing PS2 again. If I hit my DT button, the button that I programmed to adjust my mix biasing, you will see that the number on the right will decrease or increase depending on which way you push it. You'll see if I move down to 70%, when I pull the throttle all the way, the second bar graph is shorter than the top one. This represents that the bottom is, which is your rear motor, is only getting 70% of the power of the front motor. You can adjust this to equal, which would be your typical 4-wheel drive, or you can go greater, which will give you more power to the rear motor. This is proportional throughout the throttle stroke. That takes care of programming the 4PK. You can do things like, if you feel like adjusting which way the DT button moves when you press it forward or backwards, if it increases or decreases. If it's not the way you like it, you can go down to the button you programmed, go to the right, and change it from normal to reverse or vice versa.
That'll wrap up my guide on how to set up your Axial XR10. If you have any questions you think I might be able to answer, you can contact me via email at harley0706@gmail.com, or you can find me at rccrawler.com. Screen name Harley